to make that email worth something that they send to authorize people to spend those make-believe dollars into the economy. Now, what those dollars do is they go out into the economy, and they bid up prices. So when people talk about the national debt and they're talking about this is something that our children are going to pay, that's not really quite accurate. Our children and our grandchildren aren't necessarily going to pay that. What that's going to do, they're going to rack up they're going to print up a bunch more money. It's going to destroy the value of the dollar. It's going to take more dollars to do the same amount of work. Like I said, that law of supply and demand, and prices are going to rise accordingly. And so when a Big Mac is $35, you're paying the national debt. Does that make sense? It's pretty sneaky. If they tried to raise taxes to match their spending, they'd have had a revolution a long time ago. But this is a way that they can tax us without us seeing it. Because the way it works is if they send you a bill, if you've got $100,000 in the bank, and they send you a bill for $30,000, 30%. Ooh, ouch. You've got to write them a check. But here's what they can do. They can, instead of sending you a bill, which you'd be hot and bothered about, they just print up the money and they reduce, they get that money, and that by them expanding the money supply, everybody's bank account, the purchasing power, not the number of dollars in there, but the purchasing power of those dollars is reduced by 30%. So, whether you wrote them a check for $30,000 or you had everything that's out on the market go up by 30%, they still robbed you of the ability to redeem your labor for a valuable good or service that you want. That's how they can tax you without you seeing it. Now, not only does this system weaken the individual in order to strengthen the federal government, but then here's where it gets really bad. They take that money and they turn around and they offer it back to the state or the local governments with strings attached. They say, the feds, with this stolen money from you, they say, we will give you this money if you will do this to the people in your state. And they say, okay, we'll do it. Now here's the principle. You work for whoever signs the checks. Now what this does is this is like a wrestling move where you change from being a republic to being an empire. In a republic, the people are at the top of the food chain, and the commands roll downhill from the people on down to the government, and God gave every human being the right to life, liberty, and property, and a corresponding obligation to defend those rights as an individual and through the establishing of governments to do the same. So it's only reasonable that as a government gets further and further removed from those people, their power subsequently diminishes. That's how it works. That's the logical chain of command in a free society that's operating under the sound reasoning and rule of law. But you get that money flow reversed, where the Federal Reserve can take it right away from you, give it right to the feds. Boom, we're not a republic anymore. We're an empire where the chain of command follows the flow of money. And all of a sudden, the most far away, the most distant, the most inaccessible to us of the governments is now on top rather than us. And so what it basically is, to boil it down into real simple terms, is the government is robbing you and giving the state and local government a cut to cooperate. And they have figured out, and they do this in other countries too, watch it. They do it to us and they do it to other countries. They don't roll in here and try to boss you around and tell you how you're going to run your life. No. They buy your friends and make your friends do it. They buy our state. They bribe our state away from us and make our state do it. They give our sheriff's department a bunch of federal funding. And then when we go to the sheriff and we say, hey, sheriff, we elected you. You are very close to the source of authority, which is us. We want you to protect us from anybody who's going to trample on our rights, no matter what they call themselves, no matter how they're organized. We want you to do that, all right? And he says, ooh, I don't know. Those people you want me to protect you from make up a pretty considerable portion of our budget. And so you've got this sheriff with torn allegiance. Because we're no longer a free republic, we're a monetary, inflationary empire. Does that make sense? Is that, you got that? That is huge. We've got to understand that. They've gone to great lengths to hide that from us. Now, I could go into, in fact, I will, because I want to be fair to the other side, even though I think it's totally bogus and you're going to hate it after I tell you. John Maynard Keynes, who was the socialist guru of the 50s, who was a big advocate for this inflationary system, what he said is, he said, yes, I know that when you rob this money from people and then spend it back into the economy, yeah, it hurts them. But you know what? Overall, in general, it's good for us because the end justifies the means. And here's why. Because we take that money from them and then the government spends it into the economy. And what that does is that creates a frenzy of activity and more people pile on. And what that does then is it gets everybody all jizzed up and making money and working hard, and the end result is better. The end result is the average person is better off than if we hadn't robbed it from them and give the top another spin. That's the Keynesian model of economics. That is almost, get this, that is almost exclusively what they teach you in business school. And guess who funds business school? Guess who funds the educational, system? Is those fiat dollars. Of course, they're not going to, bash their method of funding. Now, just real briefly, what that actually does is it doesn't create investment. When the government robs from you and spends it into the economy, it creates malinvestment. Because it is investment that has sprouted up around a artificial influx of government dollars rather than a natural demand in the market. And so people build their life and their business around this influx of government freshly stolen loot. And that stolen loot is fickle and it goes from place to place. But when they inject it into the economy, it creates a bubble. A stock bubble. A housing bubble. A tech bubble. All these bubbles that we've had, you can trace their funding to injected dollars. Now, why is this good for politicians? Because they can inject it where their friends are. They can inject it to where they need votes. They can inject it to where they need donors for their campaign. This is why the politicians like this system. So, you get a bubble, and then they get caught between a rock and a hard place, and you get foreign holders of dollars getting mad because they're making their dollars that they're holding worth less. And so they pull the dollar hose out of there, and the bubble starts to go down. That's a recession. You know what they taught me in high school? In the high school textbook? I was homeschooled, but they taught in the high school textbook, depressions are causeless anomalies. End quote. That's what they taught us. That's FDR, okay? This is the monetary system, okay? I've spent enough time on it. That's all on that. The next thing that we got to understand about how our system works is that, you know what, our senators and our congressmen in Washington, they're not nearly as powerful as you might think. One thing that I've learned from dealing with government and talking to these guys and trying to get down to the nitty-gritty of why can we not be free, why can we not do this, is they are afraid of the agencies. They're afraid of the IRS, the ATF, the DEC, all these other alphabet soup agencies, because what you do is you get this kind of a separate animal from government, In our government, we're supposed to have the judicial that, reviews and applies, the executive that implements it, and the legislative that writes it. And what you do is you get an agency or a bureau. What the heck's a bureau? We had ATF come to one of our meetings like this. We had 1,000 people. And we asked them, what's a bureau? They didn't know. I said, well, do you know what an agency is? No, they didn't know that either. Well, we got the Internal Revenue Service. What's a service? They didn't know that either. We got the Transportation Security Administration. What's an administration? What are these things? Certainly you know what you are. They didn't know. We called the agencies and the services. They didn't know either. I don't know. I've worked here for 30 years and never thought that question. It's like they were like Dilbert, They worked there all this life in this cubicle and they don't know why or